think some people have already found it. So here's what we're going to ask everyone to do. This is like the prompt for us as stewards. So I just posted in the Guild Gaming channel. I'll just go to Slack so that you can see this. I'm in Guild Gaming, and for the first Guild sessions, in the first 5 minutes, the steward will present and ask all participants to go to their Guild channel and post the following message. The message is, during KB7, I'd like to blank, and I'm hopeful this guild can help by blank. I've been struggling on the music playing part, that is my job, but we wanted to just like offer some silence at the beginning of the call in order for people to, one, get into the Guild Gaming channel if they're interested, and to post their responses to this. So I'll pause for a moment here, and hopefully some people will start joining this channel. We also can open it up if people would like to share and unmute along the way. So yeah. I'll give it one last try on the music, but I don't know if it's gonna play. To close out this first.
I play it on Spotify. Will it play for everyone?
You'll have to click share sound, but let me know if this works. Does YouTube work? Interesting. Okay. Let's see. Thank you, Druzy, for pulling the link to the channel down. So that's where we have everyone go. Please do click in. Yes, I think Raluca has made a post, and then Daphne just recently. I see a few people typing, and yeah, maybe Paul, while people are typing, if you did want to give a little brief introduction, that could help us kick off along the way.
Yeah, sure. Are we doing, because I think my introduction is a bit long, Vivek, so I don't want to like to stop
Sure.
the momentum. Yeah. But maybe I can start talking a little bit about the Gaming Guild just for everyone here. So I guess I just want to welcome everyone. I know there's a lot of guilds that are here in Kernel, and we're very grateful for the time that every one of you are providing for the next hour. And as Vivek mentioned, the Gaming Guild is was started really in the start of of 2020. Was that, Vivek? Do you remember the year? And it was mostly around during that time, I would say Web3 was very different, and the Gaming Guild, what it strives to do is we try to to understand gaming in the lens of kernel. So I'll talk a little bit about that later with some slides, but the hope was that we rely on first principles and not, I guess, not just ride on the trends that are happening in Web3. And I think kernel has that vibe very much, wherein we have principles that we start from and build from there, and we'll look very much to the past on what has been done around money, around game design, around narrative, and try to learn from that as well. And yeah, how is that, Vivek? Should I continue?
I think that's beautiful, and I think we have some really good things in the chat that are pulling up in Slack. So thank you everyone for participating. If we want to just go through some of these, Paul, that could be fun. I'll just read a few of them, and if anyone wants to expand, we can go from there. But we have Paula who says, who kicked us off. So thank you, Paula. She says, I'd like to make more sense of the intersection of fashion, regeneration, and games, and hoping this guild can help with pulling those together. Blue says that they're interested in learning new things, connecting with people, showing me cool games to play with others and teach me more about the gamification of everything. I love. I think I saw a few about gamified DAO tooling apps. Yingri says gamified DAO tooling apps and wanting just an introduction of good gamification practices. Brennan also speaks about more intriguing systems for DAO participation because of that boundary between play, gamification, and coordination. So that's really interesting. Druzy has a specific project that is an awesome one that I hope people can check out in Slack, but a gamified experience in browser using data pulled from the blockchain to make a more gamified block explorer experience is my understanding of it. So exploring advice related to game design and technical implementation of open source game engines. Let's see, Sachin wants to encompass the current state of Web3 gaming and think about doing that as a collective adventure. That's a nice artifact to consider. Wow, okay, amazing. So many people typing. I might pause and see if anyone who I've already mentioned might want to expand. Maybe I'm looking at the first three. We have Paula, Blue, Yingru. If any of you or if anyone else would like to unmute while people are typing for a moment or two.
I can expand a little bit about the gamification of everything. So I attended a presentation, I wish I remembered the guy's name, last summer, and he talked extensively about how like we have gamified life in terms of like likes on Twitter or likes on Facebook or just reactions or engagement, and the attention economy. And also about how like the attention economy is like leading maybe to inattention and the ethical considerations that underlie the gamification of everything and how we interact online and like what this does neurologically, like to our like dopamine receptors, like how we're just always going for like that next hit of dopamine. Did someone like my Instagram picture or these kinds of things? And is that kind of engagement like the world that we want? So I would like to learn more about that.
Amazing. Thank you, Blue. Thank you. Paul, any reactions or anyone else? Maybe before even Paul, because we have some. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just really quickly, Vivek. I think that's really great, Blue. That's something I kind of touch on also, and just to give a brief background, how I found Kernel was exploring exactly that. Wherein I found that games were really moving towards a very monetized direction as a game developer, making games for around 20 years. So I strove to answer that question on how we could kind of move things to where we want it to be rather than the very hyper financialized direction it's going now. So yeah, thank you for that. Hopefully the guild will be able to help you out with some of the readings we're sharing and most of all with some of the conversations here. I feel like there's so much knowledge every kernel block, not just from the previous blocks, but the current blocks. So yeah, just discussing that here, I think will lead to some threads that we can pull.
Good deal. Good deal. Paul, would you like me to keep going? I want to make sure we have time for what you've had prepared. There's many more in the chat. Sachin, go ahead too, if you'd like.
Yeah, I'll just take a minute to explain what I mean. So I was briefly part of this game developer report initiative, which Game7 did. Game7 is a DAO. And we talked to more than 100 games, including Magic Eden and a lot of other platforms, just understanding the technical difficulties and the security challenges they're facing. And there was a lot of interesting findings, and it referred to like what Web3 gaming, what stage Web3 gaming is at. And, but then that report ended up into like huge amount of docs and pages that you'll have to just go through to just get a gist of it. And yeah, Paul just shared the report's link. I was thinking how cool it will be if we have a running artifact which has this abstract view of how things are, but also statistics like what kind of bots are being run right now, and more than that, it's about the statistic which reflects upon Web3 gaming, where things are right now, and what kind of tools are there. So that is one section, the statistics, and the other section is what Paul suggested. And the section is really about looking at the infrastructure of Web3 gaming as open gaming and seeing everything as an open source tool, and seeing what has been already built, what has not been built, and thinking mindfully about building those.
Yeah, and to add to that, Sachin, I actually mentioned that here at the end of my presentation. I think that's a really cool project to do, which is for us to work on a collective artifact together. And I share a few examples as well, like the pluriverse artifact and one artifact that I particularly like from KB5, which is the OX furnace. I think that was one of the best moments of KB5, wherein a group of people created this simple Burning Man artifact for everyone in Kernel. So yeah, I'll share more a bit about that later.
Beautiful, beautiful. I want to make sure we make time for Paula's post. She's in the train, but she said recently physical clothes with game-like apps to interact with our clothes and deepen the relationships with the thing we wear. I think this was expanding on the fashion and gamification, rewarding for sustainable behavior. She's a game developer, designer, and fashion designer. So it seems like a group working on the project. Thank you. Yes, connecting. Thank you, Paula. Thank you. But yeah, Paul, if there's anyone else in the chat, or Andrzej, any other messages in the Slack that catch your attention, we really appreciate those. And I hope it sets the tone in that our hope for each guild is that it's interactive. And while there will be presentation components, the way that these come home well is we know we also have the gather, and we have space in there for hopefully more interactive explorations as the guild goes on. So means a lot that you've participated, and that's the name of the game, is ideally as little as possible of an audience presenter dynamic over time, and more of a co-creative dynamic. That's the hope. So Paul, please, thank you as always, and Andrzej, thank you as well. We'll see. I think we can kick off whenever you're ready.
All right. Yeah. Thank you, Vivek. And yeah, I think I just want to echo what Vivek mentioned, wherein this first part of the guild will really just be me telling everyone about what our hopes are for the guild. But what we want to be able to do is to provide everyone the space to interact with your peers, and to not just, I guess, listen to me talk too much about games. I can talk forever about games, about how I love them, how I try to find a lot of meaning in what I'm doing and in the world in general through the lens of a game developer. So yeah, so can everyone see my screen okay? No problems? All right.
Yes.
So again, thank you, Andrzej. Thank you everyone for being here. So today will just be, I would say, a pretty quick presentation on what the Gaming Guild is about. It will be about what we'll be doing throughout the next 8 weeks. It will be, as I mentioned earlier, we'll discuss the collective artifact that Sachin mentioned, and just really what we are going to learn all throughout these 8 weeks together. And yeah, so I guess I want to start with giving a bit of an introduction on what the Gaming Guild was before. Vivek mentioned that it was one of the earliest guilds in Kernel, and how it started was how could we apply the Kernel principles in game development, and it mirrored pretty much what the Kernel principles are, and these are the ones that we see in the Kernel community site, which are these few, and we kind of mapped each week to map to each of the kernel readings. So it was what are patterns and trust in the context of game development, value, money, open source. I know open source was mentioned earlier. Game discoverability, or how the attention economy is kind of core in how games are made successful. And we end with the infinite game, which is kind of I guess a summary of everything, wherein we kind of try to see it through the lens of games, finite games and infinite games. And yeah, so that's, I think, throughout the blocks, even though the blocks have changed. So for KB5, we try to stay on trend. In KB5, which was the last block that where we had some fellows, we really focused on play to earn. So it was what play to earn was. How do we create future games beyond play to earn? I would say, and that was when, of course, all of the play to earn games also had a bit of a seismic change. So we explored that, and some of the example projects that were part of the gaming guild were born out of that block and also from previous blocks. So JS13 Games, which Andre is leading, is a community of game developers building JavaScript games just in 13 kilobytes of code. So I would say this is an early example of games being made on the web. And maybe Andre, if you want to talk a little bit about JS13K Games to give some context.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's so the competition itself started in 2012. So it runs for a month online between August 13th and September 13th. So right now we are in the middle of voting for the entries submitted to the 11th edition of the competition. And the fun fact is that we do have the decentralized category with folks trying out Web3 things, Web3 technologies in the entries. And I think it started the exploration of decentralized ecosystem within JS13K Games, thanks to Paul, because we kind of like we did the kernel block second, the second installment, and it kind of clicked immediately, and I really wanted to see participants exploring this new space and see what we can build together. So yeah, that's something nice to see, that we had another category and people are trying stuff out. There's also the Game Dev JS Jam happening in every April, and we also have the decentralized category, and we will have a game jam during this kernel block. So I'm always curious to see what people can build given the technologies we have, and build something cool and like push the boundaries of what's possible building in the browser. So yeah, I'm really excited to see what people can do with current technologies.
Right. Thank you, Andre. And I think the JS13K Games community is a perfect example of building things decentralized, build things open. It's all open source. Whenever people build games there, it's all shared online. So yeah, so hopefully we get to see some of the games there. Yeah, and a few more other projects that came out of the Gaming Guild. Well, that came out of the Gaming Guild was Atlantis World, Crypto Raiders, some of these other games, Eternal Dark Forest. So these are some of the games that didn't come out of the Gaming Guild, but rather was, I guess, created in the decentralized space. So it's worth for us to take a look at them and see what we can learn. And yeah, so and through the kernel blocks, I would say we've been able to create a lot of content already around
Paul,
how to make games. Yeah.
Paul, would you just make sure that you click the record button there? Sorry to interrupt.
Oh yeah,
it is recording. It is recording.
It's recording already. And
oh, excuse me.
Thank you for the reminder. Yeah, and yeah, and yeah, again, as I mentioned, throughout the blocks, we've already created a lot of content, I would say, around how to make games. And how we usually started it was we had Austin Griffith, who created the Scaffold ETH framework to be able to make you get started on smart contracts and the integration with web to make adapt really quickly. So yeah, so my suggestion is is that maybe every week, just go through one of the videos if you want to start learning how to make games, and if you don't have any experience on making games on the web or in general. We also have we also were able to have Richard Davey, who created the open source engine called Phaser, which he also demonstrated the integrating it with a smart contract. So that's something also something that we can learn from. So just go through each of these videos. A lot of them are their own separate topics that I feel are important in Web3. So and are from very smart people, I would say, a lot smarter than me, who can talk about these things in detail. So we have Nathan Schneider for governance, Tim Shell on how to build a decentralized universe, and using the Loot project as an example. And we talk about GameFi, the stack of a Web3 application, and finally Infinite Games. And yeah, and so I'll spend maybe a few slides just talking about what my hope is for the Gaming Guild for this block. As I mentioned, the theme for Block 5 was about how do we make games beyond play to earn, explore what play to earn is, what its effect is on games and on societies. And now I feel like just going through Kernel, I'm sure most of you have found that there's a lot of I guess intersecting knowledge domains here in Kernel. And the reason that I keep coming back and doing the Gaming Guild is I really find, well, first, I find Kernel is like my home in Web3. It kind of keeps me grounded and kind of lets me see what's happening on the wider web, I would say. But one thing also is the collective intelligence I feel that we all get by being part of this group of people. So I feel like gaming is just one part of a bigger thing that we are all working on together. It's I would say, I think it's in the kernel readings, is the parable of like the blind man and the elephant, right? When you're looking at one thing just from your own perspective, from your own angle, you don't see the big picture. And that's I think how we should start looking at the things that we're doing. And throughout kernel, I would say that we've kind of evolved the syllabus, and something that I'm hoping to do this time around is we start from the end. Like I mentioned that we ended from Infinite Games. We usually end with Infinite Games, but I feel it's worth starting with that. And I wanted to add also something that was shared in the kernel think thesis recently around consilience, and I'll talk a little bit about what that is. But one thing I do want to start is I want to share quotes from, I would say, 3 people that has influenced both kernel and I would say the wider world also, and has really influenced what the gaming guild aspires to teach. Yeah, and let me just go through that. Yeah, and of course, the first one is Dr. Kars on finite and infinite games. So I mentioned that we usually end the kernel blocks with a discussion of finite and infinite games, but I found that finite, like infinite games, has already, I would say, it's already become sort of embedded in a lot of the terminologies here in Web3. If you look at Ethereum and their terminology, and if you know of the Infinite Garden in Ethereum, the documentary that's coming up, we find that a lot of us use this as a lens when in building here in Web3. And just for everyone to have more context, Dr. Kars wrote the book Finite and Infinite Games back in the 1980s, where video games were just starting. Like there weren't really video games or Web3 games at all. And his perspective was that there were at least 2 kinds of games. One were finite games, and the other is infinite. A finite game is played for the purpose of winning, and an infinite game for the purpose of continuing play. And one good example that he shares is language, where the rules of an infinite game are like the grammar of a living language, and those of a finite game are like the rules of debate. And I think that's a great lens for us to take a look at the games that we create and design, especially here in Web3, wherein a lot of the systems are being created by us. A lot of them are also very skeuomorphic, I would say. Like we're looking at games uh, that were made before, and using that as how we should build when we should kind of explore more deeply on what kind of games should be created. I think a perfect example of that is one of the first few games that became mainstream in Web3 was, of course, CryptoKitties. That it was based out of Pokemon. So Vivek would tell you the story when he met Benny, was part of KB7 also, and Benny was sharing these Pokemon cards just when they were creating the first version of CryptoKitties during ETH Waterloo. So yeah, so we kind of look at games usually through this lens. But my hope is that with all of the smart people that you are part of here in Kernel is to explore more fully what games we should be creating, to look at it through one of these lenses, to finite and infinite games. And Dr. Kars, as a spoiler to the book, I'm sorry about that, but he ends the book with there is but one infinite game, and I think it's worth thinking about that also in the context of these next people that I will share. Yeah, and then the next one is also shared in the Gaming Guild reading, which is the very first one. I shared it also as hopefully a pre-read for everyone before we started this, and it was the article, "What's the Point If We Can't Have Fun?" by David Krieber. And I think one thing that really stood out to me there is that, you guys should read the whole thing. I think I'll butcher what he really wants to say, but one thing that stood out there is that he feels that there is a play principle at the basis of all physical reality. And he asks us the question of why do animals play? And he says, well, why shouldn't they? He feels like, for example, we can think of electrons as dancing, right? When they're deciding on how to move. It's like as he said, is there might be a play principle at the basis of all physical reality, and maybe it's worth thinking about that also in the context of games and gaming and play and what play truly means. And lastly, just to round things out together, I mentioned consilience, and I really like this concept because it was popularized by E.O. Wilson, and E.O. Wilson was a biologist. He focused on myrmecology, or the study of ants, and he came upon the term, I guess, just through going deeply into his field and trying to connect that with the wider world. Before he passed, he was focusing more on ecosystems, starting from biology into ecosystems. And this diagram that was part of his book, the Consilience, the Unity of Knowledge, was I guess an illustration of how he feels we should be thinking of certain fields of study, like environmental policy, ethics, biology, and social science. Usually they're like studied differently, but how he feels is that there should be, like, all of these have a unified, I guess, a unified thread going through them. He says that consilience is a conviction far deeper than a mere working proposition that the world is orderly and can be explained by a small number of natural laws. And one very important thing that E.O. Wilson said also, that struck me, and I think also resonated with a lot of people, was that the real problem of humanity is the following: we have Paleolithic emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technology. And it is terrifically dangerous, and it is now approaching a point of crisis overall. And I feel like that really speaks to what the challenge is that lies ahead for us as game developers. He mentions that people have Paleolithic emotions and we have godlike technology, right? And I feel like, to Blue's point earlier, wherein a lot of the tools that we are building aren't used in a principled manner. That we're building games, for example, that are super hyper financialized. And my hope is that with the people here in this group and us thinking about what kind of games we should be building, and knowing that we have these godlike tools, that we strive to build games that allow us to be more pro-social. And pro-sociality also is something that's part of the kernel syllabus, and which we'll be discussing over the guild. And yeah, and just to bring everything back together, the Gaming Guild has a very game development lens because it's mostly me, Andre, and some game developers who are the kind of the guest speakers and curating the syllabus. But I feel that what we learn here will be definitely applicable to whatever field. Like we discuss play, infinite games, value, trust, meaning, identity. All of these are part of the kernel syllabus, the grander kernel syllabus. And with the lens of game design and game development, I think it will allow us to fully appreciate more how we design our systems. As Vivek mentioned earlier, I also feel like game design is one of the core things you should be learning when you're in this space. It kind of grounds everything that we're building. Right, maybe I can stop there for a few seconds for any questions or if any comments, and then the next part I'll kind of discuss what we'll be going through the whole guild.
One quick question: can we share your slides?
Of course, yeah. I'll share.
Okay,
the
I'm just gonna
slides.
paste it. I just pasted it in the chat.
Yeah. And I'll share it in the Slack as well. All right, maybe I'll just spend a few seconds going through the chat. Okay, yeah, thank you for the comments. I'll be here also to discuss more of these with you guys, but let me just finish the syllabus. And my hope also is after this initial session, we all decompress and gather. Maybe I'll start with discussing it here on the slide. So mostly during the Kernel Gaming Guilds in the past few blocks, we had Let's Play sessions organized by Sachin and Angela. And one of the earlier games we played were Among Us. I think this was shared recently in the Identity Guild, where we play Among Us after a discussion on identity. So the hope is we play games together with I guess also for fun, but also for research purposes. So that's one of the things that we'll be doing, which is Let's Play sessions here at the end. But before then, the hope is every 2 weeks we'll have these kinds of discussions. This is mostly me and Andre for now, just giving an intro on the Gaming Guild. But for the next week, or for October 6th, 2 weeks later, we're hoping to discuss infinite games more and board games. I feel that there's a consilience there, and Ronan Sanford, one of the Kernel Gaming Guild alum, he just posted an article on infinite games and how we should be using board games as a starting point for creating them. And I do know also that we have some folks in the Kernel block who are board game designers or no board game designers, and my hope is we get to learn from them and also just approach it from that new lens that we haven't done before. Next is we'll bring in someone from Web2 who will talk about what games we should build in Web3. My hope is we get someone who has a different lens than us. In a few blocks before, we had Lars Ducey, who is very critical of Web2 or Web3 rather, and the things that we're building. And I think it's important for us to realize that there are other viewpoints aside from us, and hopefully it gets us to build more things that people need. And lastly, I'm hoping to bring someone to talk about the open metaverse. I think that's a nice way to end the Gaming Guild. It's a future-looking topic. A lot of people in the space are talking about metaverses and not really, I guess, going deeper as we do here in Kernel on what we should be building. So my hope is we go through that in that last part and just end the block with us having I guess a look towards the future and building things that will benefit not just us but the people that we're building for. And then all throughout the block we'll have peer juntos as well. We'll start a few of those on our end so that we give people the hang of doing them and going through them. But my hope is we similar to the other guilds is that we create these juntos ourselves. As I mentioned, there's a lot of knowledge just in this block, and a lot of knowledge also with the previous blocks. So try to reach out to people. A lot of the Kernel Gaming Guild folks are still there in the blocks to help you out in your journey. Also, as Andre mentioned, we'll have a game jam, and the hope is that one in your adventures, some of you will choose to create a game and that you demo them. I would say in certain moments of Kernel. I know, like in previous blocks for the fourth week, we had the Kernel Expo where we would show the projects that were done or are currently being done during Kernel, and yeah, and it could be something fun. I know Andre and I are thinking of how we can make this more fun. Maybe use what has been done in JS13K, or maybe use other platforms to kind of allow other people to play the games that are being created. We'll also have mentorship during Friday office hours. So one thing I suggest here is if you have any questions on how to make games, just post them on Slack. We'll go through them and I can connect you with the people who have gone through the Gaming Guild. I mentioned some of the folks that were speakers like Austin Griffith, who created Scaffold Eve, Ronan Sanford, who created Jolly Roger. These are people who have been creating games in the space for quite a long time, and there's lots to learn from them. And then lastly is the collective Gaming Guild artifact. So this is something we haven't done yet in the Gaming Guild. Sachin mentioned it briefly earlier, but the hope is we all work on something together and make that sort of as something to commemorate what we did together during the block. So we're gonna start by sharing a repo. It takes a little bit of time. I just need to finish cleaning up the repositories, but I think we can just use that and share that in Slack and see how we can jam around this shared repository and see what we kind of want to build together. So it's not yet fully fleshed out, but we'll see how the block goes. All right, and just 2 more slides. So just to talk a little bit about the Gaming Guild artifact. So during kernel blocks, usually some people come together to create something that I guess they want to share with the wider world. So one of them was the Pluriverse artifact. So it's here on pluriverse.world, created by some of the good folks from Versus. And what they created was sort of a pushback against the renaming of Facebook to Meta. So during that time, Facebook renamed to Meta, and it was sort of like it was sort of offensive to the people building on the metaverse, wherein Facebook was trying to co-opt what was being built out in the open. So the Pluriverse team and a few other folks, I would say, started pushing back, and this is one of the results of that, the Pluriverse.world artifact. One of the other fun artifacts created during kernel was the OX Furnace one. If you were in the Gather Town yesterday, they created a bit of a small experience there. The hope was that we put the NFTs that we don't want to keep anymore and burn them in sort of a ritual like the Burning Man. So these fun artifacts, I would say, are something I'm hoping that we work on together. They don't have to be like full-on video games, right? But something that will allow us to I guess end the Gaming Guild and say that I was part of that, I created that, and whenever other kernel albums come back, they kind of see that this is the Kernel Block 7 Gaming Guild artifact that hopefully will last as the kernel blocks roll on. Yeah, and I guess are there any questions on for us? Maybe if anyone wants to unmute and have their questions. I'll take a little bit of time to just go through the chat.
Yes, can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, Hilario, go ahead.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the presentation. I was just wondering, I saw somebody actually typing in the Slack, do you need any technical knowledge basically to participate? That's one. And second of all, I'm wondering as well, when it comes to the technical side, what are the languages that you can, write with? Is it, for example, blockchain related Solidity, or you can just use like JavaScript or C# or C++. I'm kind of wondering what is the most knowledge when it comes to programming language and that you can participate.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for the question, Hilario. I think if you want to make games on Web3 using smart contracts, I think you do need to start with Solidity. And that's the reason why the first video there on the Kernel Gaming Guild records is with Austin Griffith having us go through Scaffold ETH. I would say though that that you don't really need a lot of a deep understanding of Solidity at the start. For example, if you're going to make NFTs, all the code is already there, you just copy them. So you just need to just play around with the repository and try to learn it. But I would say Solidity, just because we want to be working on smart contracts, right? We want to work on Ethereum because that's more decentralized than the current systems that we have. As for the games themselves, we have another video there by Richard Davey on Phaser. Phaser is one of the open source game engines, which is a bit easy to start with. So I suggest go through that video as well. And he goes through making a game on Phaser. It uses JavaScript. So JavaScript would be what you need to make those games. But it doesn't have to be that. There are other platforms to use like Unity. There are some no-code platforms for making games as well. So yeah, but the challenge there is you need to be able to tie them with smart contracts. So no technical experience needed. My hope is we are planning to do board games design as well, right? As a starting point. So if we want to make like an actual video game, there's going to be some technical experience needed to put that out. But my hope during Kernel is you don't need that hard technical experience and able to create something together as maybe a start. And if you do want to make it like an actual game, then maybe it's time to collaborate with technical people. Yeah, hopefully that answers your question. Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Ooh, and Blue, do you have a question for us?
I do actually. So I work as a data scientist, and I'm really interested in studying emergent behavior like through gaming platforms. So I just wanted to put this out there, like if anybody, like I don't want to build a game, but I would love to have like position or player data with which to study like how people come together to form a team, to form a collective, like lots of different, I mean, I've analyzed like League of Legends data before. And so I just wanted to just put that out there. If anybody has data or can gain access to like the back end and the data, like I'm so happy to analyze it and really probe deeper into that and how people kind of cooperate or compete.
Cool, yeah, thank you, Blue. I think you probably know, of course, of doing analytics. For blockchain games, at least that's the data set that most people use. But for games, you're right there, League of Legends, Dota, I know also has data that they put out in the open. But yeah, I'll keep my eye on the lookout. And if anyone can share, do share with Blue as well. And then Ryan, do you have any questions for us?
I just wanted to add to what Blue said. That's super interesting to me because in the past, we've to get the data on people is controlled by the Googles and the Facebooks and all that. And we commonly look to nature and all sorts of things in economics to be able to pull data and make assumptions and intelligence on it. But up until now, we haven't had what I would call like people powered data to be able to really study social interactions on the internet because it's been kind of gated off by these platforms. So what does it look like to have people powered data on the ledger that people control themselves so that we can kind of contextually analyze these social behaviors in a completely open and emergent way. And the exciting thing there is like, to me, it's the first time that we can actually analyze in an open way, like people powered data and see how that relates to other things. And to get real super nerdy in 20 seconds, I just put that post about the James Webb Telescope, and scientists around the world are kind of like figuring out like or questioning the general consensus of like the Big Bang Theory and all this kind of stuff. And in my mind, and trying to figure out how to solve that problem of like, how is the universe created and stuff. In my mind, it's like, maybe the answer to that problem, to get real meta, is if we have a way to be able to analyze people-powered data, billions of interactions over time, and figure out how these emergent behaviors of human socialization are kind of are formed and birthed and merged together and all this kind of stuff. Like, maybe by having access to that data, that will start to unlock other things like the patterns of the universe, the opposites, like the comparative thing of social data to the universe forming. That's probably the craziest thing I've ever said in my life. But I was thinking about that this morning, and it's just like, we can build games, and if the data is open and the way that we build them is in these little protocolized things where it's not like one thing controls everything, but everybody just adds value to it. And if the output of that is people powered data, then I think long term, 50 years from now, we'll be able to look, we'll be able to look at all these social interactions through the new internet. But what you're saying, Paul, is like the internet is the game, right? So how can we look at these social interactions in a gamified way and be able to pull like social good data out of that to make sense of other things? So anyways, I just wanted to jump on that before I forget.
I think that's a perfect example of consilience, right? Like, I feel like we look at it from a different lens, and then it applies somewhere else. And I guess also for everyone interested in that space, the Open Data Guild also is starting next week. So it might be good to kind of go through both guilds and see the intersections there. But yeah, thank you, Ryan. And then Victor, do you have something to add?
Yeah, I mean, I've been using video game engines for a while now, and but I sometimes make games, but I not all the time make games with them. I usually use a game engine to produce art or some kind of interactive art, performance, also movies and things like this. And one thing that I find fascinating about working with this technology is the process, right? The process of using the technology and how this usage actually, it's an incredible way to think about things. Besides the game itself, right, which has its own ideas, there's also the process of making it and how you think about it, because you have to think about limitations. You have to think about things that you can or cannot do, which is, limitations. You have to think about, how you start building a world, what are the main things about this world? You have to think about rules, all this stuff. I find it really fascinating, and I would like to see if there is some material in this guild about this, which is not only about how to learn how to make a video game, or the process is a process of, a process of thinking, like very different than the process of like making a film, for example, or making a video or writing a piece of text. The process of making a video game is a very different thing in my experience. And I want to see if you guys have some of that material here.
Yeah, I'll share a few videos that I've seen, Victor. Like, some of them were like postmortems of how games were created. And just to that point, I think not even games, that the process of creation, as you mentioned, is really interesting. I've been because of the Jam Music channel in Kernel, I've been following this podcast on how songs were created. I don't know if you've seen this show in Netflix wherein they break down each song. It's called Song Exploder, and they break down each part and how it was created, what was going through the mind of the artist. So yeah, it's very fascinating to me as well. So yeah, we'll share a few of those in the Gaming Guild. Thank you, Victor. And then Nastasia, do you have a question for us?
Yeah, hi. So first of all, a pleasure to connect with all of you, and a pleasure also to be part of this guild. Looking forward to learn a lot and explore. So yeah, my key question was around if you could share a little bit about pro-social games. So just to set the scene, I'm trying to explore how games could be used for the integration of immigrants in new business cultures. So that's one thing that's on my mind. And the second thing is, like, I'm an innovation practitioner, and I wonder how I could actually use games for team innovation. So it refers a little bit about what Victor was mentioning before, like game thinking, right? That's something that I'm interested. So if you could share a little bit more about those pro-social games, that would be super useful. And then secondly, if you could share a little bit more of how we could combine then, game with Web3 and like with this social aspect. This is something that I'm trying to get my head around and explore.
Yeah, sure. So I'll think of a few, but I think one thing to start looking at, Nastasia, would probably be do a search on cozy games. So I think this is a new trend that's coming up. I feel like game developers have started to realize that that games are pretty toxic, honestly, right? If you look at League of Legends, Dota, a lot of the people playing them, when they play it, they get angry. Like it's not really a game that you play to relax. So cozy games are designed especially for that. A lot of these games were made by people who started thinking of pro-social games as well. I would say I'll share a few links, and there are some on the Gaming Guild syllabus. But Spry Fox, one of the I guess one of the developers who were early in the cozy game space, have some studies on how to make things more pro-social, and it's and yeah, I'll share that on Slack. There's a pretty nice presentation during GDC wherein he talks about how do we make more friends and what is the system of making friends and what are the variables there. So I'll share that. Cool. All right. Yeah. Thank you everyone for the questions. And thank you for staying. I know we've gone over we're almost gone through the hour, but my hope is we also have some time to kind of decompress in Gather. That's something we're hoping with Kernel this time around also, is we use Gather as a space for all of us to collaborate and also to play. So I guess next step for us is we go to the bit.ly cafe Kernel link. There's a space there, which is the board game cafe, and my hope is we all go there. I think it also is beneficial for us to look at Gather as with a lens of a game designer. Gather actually does a good job of getting people to interact with each other, and this board game cafe will allow us to play games together, to play some board games. Something that's been popular with Kernel blocks has been the draw battle game as well, where we draw a game, we draw something. It's like charades, or like I forget the name, but it's like you guess what is being drawn by your teammates. But that's a space where we can kind of try to see what games are made in the metaverse, I would say, and try to imagine what they will look like in the future. Yeah, so I'll go through a little bit on that channel here first. But maybe Sachin, is there anything that we need to mention before we go there?
Yeah, Salim just commented, so I'll just let Salim let us know that if this space still exists, because we made some changes this time.
I think it's kind of hard to find. I was able to find it just today, or just yesterday.
Oh, you were able to find it, right? Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
if you guys jump together,
I can get us a link for it.
Yeah. So Sal will
and
get
I think
us a spawning link.
One thing you can do in Gather also is to follow someone. So maybe just right click on my name and follow, and there should be a line that will allow you to just follow that line, and you'll be led to this place. So just a little fun hide and seek game for us, I guess, once we hop in there. But yeah, if anyone has any questions before we hop on together, just I'll stay here for a few seconds, but it's been a pleasure, everyone, to introduce you to the guild. I hope that was a good introduction for you to understand what we're hoping to do, and I'm really looking forward to get to know each of you more and to talk games with you. And yes, so when do we start making games together? So I guess let's start by playing them first and trying to think of ideas, and then let's start making them throughout the block. Thank you, everyone. I'll start heading together.
Yeah, and Sachin, I can stay here just to make sure everyone gets to where they want to be.
Cool. All right. I'll just stop the recording now.
Thank you, everyone.